Is having the courage to try, right? The courage to try. And the fear of failure, everybody has a little, degree of fear of failure, right?
All the time.
Right?
Yes.
But if you don't have that, then you're probably not trying hard for anything hard enough, right? You're not reaching high enough, right? That
That's
that
true.
fear comes from extending one's reach, um, beyond the comfort area, right? And
Mhm.
you can extend your reach beyond the comfort area, at least you're trying something, right?
Welcome to the road to greatness. Get ready to be inspired and empowered to take your career to the next level. Let's talk about it. Before we get into the next example of greatness, I want to invite you to join this pro tip partner community, which is designed to help ambitious, ever evolving professionals like yourself find a new pro tip, habit, or mindset that helps take your performance to the next level. So here's what I'd love for you to do. First, click subscribe or follow, and then share this episode with anyone who you think needs a little boost. And you can keep the conversation going by following us on social media at Carlyn, Karlyn, RTG podcast. I'd love to hear your comments, questions, and if you try anything from my guests, let me know. Welcome to this episode of The Road to Greatness. I'm your host, Carlyn Kiefer, and I am delighted to welcome our guest for this week. His name is Ed Foster-Simeon, and if you don't know the name, you should absolutely know his work. He has been president and CEO of the U.S. Soccer Foundation since 2008, has more than 2 decades of experience at the local, state, and national level of the game, and has been an active member of the U.S. Soccer Foundation's board of directors since 2004. He has an award-winning organization, nationally, globally recognized, and his history, his path, his road to greatness is awesome. So I don't want to talk anymore until I bring him in. So Ed, welcome.
Thank you, Carl. I'm so glad to be here with you.
Great to be here. So let's talk about it. One of the things that I love a lot and what we have bonded a lot over is our mutual background in television news. So you weren't always head of a nonprofit. You weren't always on the sports side of things. You were out there covering the news and the daily events. Talk about that a little. So what was so great? What kept you in that business for such a long time?
Yeah, my primary career was in journalism. I was, before I became CEO at the U.S. Soccer Foundation, I was deputy managing editor for news at USA Today, where I was responsible for Washington political and foreign coverage. And so journalism, it's interesting. When I first started my college career more years ago than I care to admit, um, you know, I went to school I was going to be a social worker because that's what my uncle was, a social worker. And he was the only college educated person in my family. And so I thought, okay, I'll be a social worker. But when I got to college, I realized very quickly that that's not what I wanted to do. And what I gravitated to was my natural skill set. All through high school, the thing that got me through school was my ability to write, to the ability to convey ideas. And that was the secret sauce that got me through high school, informed my learning and education. And I love to read. And so journalism, I became an English major quickly and then moved into journalism. Uh, the interesting part of my journey, though, I didn't just go to college and go into journalism. I started college, ran out of money, um, joined the Navy as a Navy journalist,
Oh, wow.
and served in the Navy as a journalist for 7.5 years. Before finished my college degree while I was in the Navy, going to school at night, and then transitioned into my first newspaper job here in Washington, D.C. at the Washington Times as a feature writer.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I've known you for probably 15 years now, and I don't know that I ever knew that part. So, okay, so but I love the reading and the writing piece, and that I'm going to double down there for just a moment for the simple fact that a lot of times I know people of our generation talk about the lack of writing skills in so many younger
Mhm.
folks today, where do you see the writing and the ability to tell a good story or the ability to convey thoughts and communicate effectively? How has that served you other than it's been, the way that you've gotten paid? But I mean, how does that actually get you to the next step?
So it's interesting. I have four children. They're all adults now, and I've talked to numerous young people at high schools and at community colleges. And there's one consistent thing that I have told them all, and that is if you can learn to write well, communicate ideas well, it doesn't matter what business you go into. You can be success. You don't have, it's not journalists. You don't have to be a journalist. The ability to convey ideas has so much currency in any industry because often the smartest people in the room can't convey an idea. They know all the technical details, they know how the thing works, they can make out the engineering specs, but they can't convey to another person what it is that this thing does and why it's important and why they should care about it. And so the ability to convey ideas is a universal skill set that will take you anywhere, no matter what business you are in. In fact, if you look at most CEOs, they're good communicators. They are the people who can take all the business and convey it in a way that stakeholders and others can understand what it is that the company's trying to do, right? Where it's trying to go, and then get behind that idea.
Yeah, and if I could, I know that most people are listening and they're not watching us, so they don't know that I would love to just stand and give you a standing ovation on just that statement alone, because it is so undervalued. And certainly as we step into, and actually we're not stepping into, we are knee deep in the social media era,
Yes.
where it's get it out in 200 characters, or 150 characters, or however which way, whichever platform you're on, what their character limit is. And so people forget about really the art form of conveying great ideas.
Yeah. And when you learn to write, it actually helps in speaking, right? Because when you learn how to crystallize thoughts down into the essence of what it is, in TV journalism, they call it sound bites, right? But it's basically what's the real point here? What are we trying to say?
Mhm.
And conveying that is just has so much value. And there is a certain sadness that I feel about the loss of writing skills. You know, I'm not the first executive to talk about the decline in writing of in the workplace of young people who come in and really can't write cohesive, content, and it can be frustrating. But it's a sign of the times that we're in that there's not enough time devoted to those communication skills, and I think it's an important art. And as I shared a minute ago, it's not just a nice to have. An essential skill set to success in any field.
Mhm. Agreed. And it's not that you can't get further. It's not that you'll never be able to do something, but that road might be harder, bumpier. It just might take a little bit longer if you
Yeah,
don't have those cores.
or the flip of that is that having these skill sets opens doors quicker for you, right? It allows people to know that you know something, right?
Yes. Right.
That if you can't convey the idea, then it's difficult for anybody to know.
Yeah. One of your responsibilities as the CEO and president of the foundation is that you have to gain corporate partnerships or gain community partnerships. During your time there, you've received awards and grants from a variety of organizations, including, and I want to say it was Robert Wood Johnson Foundation
Robert
and
Wood Johnson.
others.
Yep, and others. Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so you are in essence also a salesman to some degree. So talk
Yeah.
to me about the prep for that. And one, I know writing skills, absolutely, communication skills. You can't sell it as you just described. You can't sell it if you can't talk about it in a
Right.
really nice, crisp way. What are some of the other elements or the must-haves as you are going out and creating those partnerships and getting those sponsors to come on board?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Carlin. It's interesting to me because one of the hardest things that I had when I transitioned from the newspaper business into nonprofit and into this role of having to raise money, I struggled with that at first. I come from a childhood and a life where asking anybody for anything, you just didn't do that, right?
Mhm. How dare I
Uh,
impose?
right. You just didn't. And I had this really good conversation with a former, I can't even remember his name now, but he left an impression on me. He used to work for the Kellogg Foundation. And, I was at some conference and I don't know how the conversation came up, but I shared with him my trepidations around fundraising. And he said, you're not asking for you. You're asking for these kids in underserved households who can't ask for themselves. And that for me, that's all I needed because this work, at least for me, I can't speak for anybody else. I care so passionately about the ability to use sport and particularly this game of soccer as a vehicle to connect kids with caring adults, to connect them with coaches who are often the most influential people in a child's life. I care so personally about that that's how I sell. Now, if you ask me to sell widgets or something else, I probably not so much, right? But because it's personal and I feel deeply about it because I know the role that a coach has played in my life, that having access to sport has played in my personal life and my growth and my development. I care so deeply about it. And I know the loss when kids don't have it.
Mhm.
We too often think of sport as just fun and games, and it's not. It's a non-traditional learning platform, right? It's a place where kids learn soft skills, leadership, teamwork, perseverance, grit. Those things that when they go to work one day, these are things you should know when you get to the workplace. How to be accountable to other people, how to be a part of a team, all those things. And when kids in under-resourced communities don't have access to that, then they're missing out on an important learning that shapes their overall development.
Mhm. Yeah, and one of those that you didn't mention, but I'll add in my thought there is it also teaches resilience, right?
Yes.
Because and certainly, and I say this with full respect and fun and good nature, our DC teams here in the
Yeah.
DMV
Yeah.
have learned resilience
Yes.
and how to
Yes.
keep getting back up. Um,
Yes.
but there's a part about losing and not getting the participation trophy and participation award. You gotta learn
Yep.
how to come back better the next time.
You learn how to come back and you learn that, improvement comes from hard work, right? From, trying something over and over again until you learn it, right? These are important skills. They seem like the kids are just out having fun, but they're learning so much.
Mhm. Absolutely. And your passion has come through so much and for so long that I should at least point out that you yourself were awarded the Community Leadership Award from the President's Council on Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition back in 2011, just because it is so dear to you. This is something, and you can hear it in what you say, that you're in it for all the right reasons, which again makes you significantly more effective in what you're trying to do. So that's fantastic. One other thing, and which actually is something that we talk about a lot in the classes and the workshops that I do is as people are making decisions, all decisions are made with the heart and rationalized with the brain, right? And so when you have that much passion, that's the heart coming in, then it's okay to like then you can make up all the reasons, all the
Right.
logic, all the whatever, um, and then tap into that same passion that somebody else might have that makes them want to get on board with you. So if you can, how do you approach that? How do you figure out, one, it's how are you figuring out who you want to partner with or who you'd like to bring on board? But then also, how are you crafting that message to make it to tap into wherever their passion might be? Because we're all driven by different things. How are
Yeah.
you connecting that dot for them?
For me, and this may not come out correctly, but for me, it's really about authenticity, right? If I'm trying to sell you something, then that's a transactional kind of conversation,
Mhm.
and I have not had success with that. What I share is what is it that we're trying to do? How does it align with the values or the interests of the other organization? And can we see the shared benefit of participating in this, right?
Mhm.
Because it should be a shared benefit. Nonprofit is the funny thing about nonprofit, which I never really thought about is before I came over to this side, is that in most businesses, you sell something, you give someone a product, they pay for it, and they receive the product, and they take it and you do whatever they will with it. In a nonprofit, the payer is not receiving anything. They're providing something for somebody else, right? For someone else to receive, which is a
Right.
whole different kind of engagement. So if you can't connect that to someone's personal interest or their business objectives, like why does that matter to me? Why would I do that?
Right. Why am I just going to give away the money and just be like,
Yes,
hey?
right. But that's why I say the authenticity, authentic connection to them personally, either because they have had some life experience that they can totally relate
Mhm.
to the mission of what you're doing, or because their business interests align with that, because they see that they want to reach more families in these circumstances, in these communities. They want to show their stakeholders their investment in community in authentic ways, right? You talk about communicating ideas. So many companies have CSR programs, and many, to be, quite honest, many of them are just smoke and mirrors, right? It's like, okay, we did this, we took a photo, and we did something,
And let
and
me
then
just say for folks who don't know, CSR is corporate social responsibility.
yes,
But go
corporate
ahead.
social responsibility.
Right.
The part of the company is supposed to do good,
Hmm.
and then others are much more intentional about, no, we really want to invest our corporate dollars in communities in ways that have real value, real meaning, real impact. And those companies often have a connection through their employees and other stakeholders to those communities, right? That the people who either shop at their stores or who work for them, that they come from, communities that may not have as much as others. And so being able to show a commitment to community and social impact and doing good has value for them on a business side.
How do you prep if it's not giving away too much information? How do you prepare for those conversations? I know you don't just say, "Hi, I'm Ed. Can you partner up?" Or,
Mm.
"Hi, I'm Ed. What's important to you? Can you partner up?" Right? There's got to be foundation laid, there's legwork done. What's the homework? What does that look like on your side to understand them before you have your first conversation? Can you give us a little insight into just what does that preparation pathway look like for you before you go in with an objective of getting someone to get on board?
Well, as one journalist to another, I think right? It's the same preparation as if you were doing an interview with someone. Or you're going for a job interview. You want to know as much about the company or the individual to understand what's important to them, right? Because it's a two-way street. All these conversations have to have value on both ends. And I can't identify your needs unless I've done enough research to understand what it is that your company is trying to accomplish, what you care about as an individual, those kinds of things. So it's very much like preparing for a news interview where you read the background on the individual or on the company. You read, you try and talk with other people who have maybe interacted with them and understand a little bit more so that you can go into a conversation with an understanding of who's on the other side of the table and what really matters to them. So we can talk about sport in all kinds of contexts. We can talk about soccer in the context of girls and women, right? We can talk about it in the context of the Hispanic Latino community. We can talk about it in the context of economic, access, low income households lacking access. It all depends on, there's so many ways, but the work remains the same. The work doesn't change. It's just understanding what part of the work resonates most with the person on the other side of the table.
And again, in my tongue-in-cheek moment, back in the day, though, when we were reporters, we didn't have Google. So it's a lot easier now.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yes.
So much easier
Yeah.
than trying to go through paper files
Yes.
and what have you. So for those who don't like the heavy lift, just appreciate where you are in today's
Yeah.
um, technology environment versus when you and I were out there trying to find the best details and
Yeah.
such. So do you look at, are you looking at strategic plans when you talk about what the company cares about, what their mission is? Are you looking at their strategic plans? Do you look at their website? Are you looking at bios? What are some of your favorite go-tos?
Well, you obviously go to the website. There's two ways for a nonprofit to engage with a corporation. This is corporations in particular. One is through their corporate social responsibility, the CSR platforms, which will often be articulated on their website somewhere that these are the things that our corporate social responsibility prioritizes, right? So understanding that. But then it's also reading. I read the Wall Street Journal every day to understand companies, to understand what are their business objectives, what are they trying to accomplish, who are they trying to attract, what are the challenges that they're facing. It's reading various sources of information to get an understanding because the corporate social responsibility side is one part of the business, but then there's a whole marketing side of the business that may be wanting to reach the communities that we serve and may be looking for authentic ways to engage. We have a major event coming to the United States in the next few years. The FIFA World Cup will be
Yes.
hosted in the US, Canada, and Mexico in 2026. So there are a number of companies that are trying to figure out, well, how do we engage around this major event that's coming to the United States? And what we provide is a way to engage in a way that is authentic and has social impact, right?
Mhm.
That which and if if you read enough, you know that corporations not only have to care about what they're selling and their products, but how they are perceived by their consumers, right? How their stakeholders perceive them. If they're are they perceived to be good corporate citizens? Are they perceived to be doing the right things around the environment, around community, around these things? So helping them find ways to tell those stories, to share their values through work with a nonprofit such as the U.S. Soccer Foundation is an easy way for them to engage in an authentic way.
And you serve in that capacity, and 2 years, I'm learned time flies so fast. So 2 years will be here in a moment and in a flash. Um, but you can be the bridge even, right, between corporate America and your grassroots groups that they're trying to reach and the families and what have you, so that because I mean we'd all be lying if we didn't say that soccer is infinitely more popular outside of the US than it is
Yep.
actually in. And so you being able to be that glue to pull
Mhm.
everything together is a tremendous thing. And again, you've got to be able to communicate that appropriately and show that you can participate in whatever the plan is or even help construct the plan.
Yes, exactly. And everyone is looking for like right now the focus on the Olympics. So lots of folks are doing things around the Olympics and those kinds of things. But being able to engage with partners where it really is a partnership, where you're really trying to understand what is it that what do they really need to accomplish? What matters to them? And then sharing what matters to us, right?
Mhm.
And determining if there's a fit there. And there's not always a fit, right? It's always best to work with people who you're aligned with um, at the fundamental core level, because nothing ever goes perfectly, right?
Right.
But when you're aligned, then you can weather any kind of challenges or difficulties, right? When you're ill-aligned and you're just in a business transaction, then anything can derail that, right? Anything. And so I think it's really important. It's incumbent on the fundraiser or organization like mine
Hmm.
to partner with folks that you feel like it really is a partnership, and it's not just a transactional deal.
Right. And it's not like you're not just chasing the company name, right? You're
Yes,
actually looking for some place where you can connect on a deeper level to move things
yes.
forward. A lot of our listeners come from sales, either as
Mhm.
salespeople or customer service or something in that nature. And the piece that we talk about a lot in our sales workshops is really understanding what's the value to the customer, really
Mhm.
understanding. And this is whether you're selling software, this is whether you're selling widgets,
Right,
chairs, paper, whatever, but what is that ultimate value?
right.
And not just show up and throw up, which is a very common expression in sales, right? Where you come in with your PowerPoint and you
Yeah,
deliver the same presentation that you've delivered 15 other companies.
yeah,
Um, and you may not understand why it didn't connect, or you may actually connect, but it's an artificial connection, right? And
right.
so if you don't actually have that mutual value, then a competing priority could pop up and derail anything else, because it's standing on such shaky ground.
Yeah, and
In
it's
the
like any relationship, right? Any human interactions, if you invest the time in understanding the person on the other side and what their needs are, and not just your needs,
Mhm.
then, obviously as a salesperson, you want the sale, right? That's your need. But to get that sale, spending some time to understand what does the other person need on the other side and to fill that hole for them, to fill that gap. The chairman of my board calls it what's in it for me, right? That's the question. That's the question the other side. What's in it for me?
Always.
I,
That's
I know
right.
what's in it for you. You're gonna get the sale, but what's in it
What's
for
the
me?
whiff 'em? That's right. The number one sales expression
And,
that's out there. The whiff 'em. What is
yeah,
what's in it for me?
yeah, exactly. So it's interesting. I've learned a lot though, transitioning from the news side to the nonprofit side, and the ability to think in news terms around understanding what's happening in society, what's happening in communities. As a reporter, I have an intuitive sense of how to understand what's happening, and to know what kind of facts support a case. Um,
Mhm.
because today, I think the era of just the heartstring kind of nonprofit that, oh, what a lovely story, we're going to give you a ton of money because you told a lovely story. Um, those days are pretty much by and gone. People are looking for proof that whatever it is that you're doing,
It's gonna work.
that it works, it makes a difference. Can you show any evidence that, our investment with you is going to have meaning, and is going to really deliver the things that we're talking about? And so at the U.S. Soccer Foundation, we made an early commitment to like an evidence-based approach so that when we went to potential partners, we weren't just telling them a nice story about how kids should have the chance to play and they should have a coach who's trained to be a mentor, but we could show that when these things occurred, improved health outcomes, improved youth development outcomes, engagement in school, all these things improved because of this participation, which is a totally different story, right?
Hmm.
Now you're talking about metrics and things that matter that people can go, oh, I invested in that, and these are the outcomes that are a result of that, which gives them a story to share with their stakeholders as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're going to take a break for just a moment so that I can go pay a bill or two. When we come back, we'll figure out from Ed, what does mental agility and the ability to pivot have to do with, or how does that help him in his role as the CEO of the U.S. Soccer Foundation? Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Think you're a great sales leader just because you were a top seller? Think again. At ProTip Partners, we turn good managers into great leaders. Our unique hands-on workshops combine improvisation techniques with core sales leadership fundamentals, making you more agile in managing your team. with tailored scenarios for your industry. Our engaging veteran facilitators ensure you're ready to set visions that will have your team running through walls for you. Because remember, 57% of people say they've left a job because of their managers, not their companies. Ready to be a leader your team will break barriers for? Call 3014-PRO-TIP or visit protippartners.com. Let's surpass those revenue goals together.
Welcome back. One of the things I love to get into is, as someone who has, I myself have changed career paths or careers multiple times, right? Starting in television, a brief bit of radio, moving into training, doing some diversity work, coming back into the training and learning and development space, pivoting seems to be a consistent theme amongst those who are making their path and moving higher forward and onward. Talk to me about, for you, and obviously you've had your own career pivots, but also in your role as the CEO and figuring out, you mentioned before the break, we may not have a fit, right? You go in thinking this is going to be a great idea, and then you go, oops. Talk to me about when do you have to pivot, and what does that pivot look like?
Well, when you pivot when you have to, right? That's the reality of it. Interestingly, I was just sharing with someone about my timing coming to the U.S. Soccer Foundation. I left USA Today on a Friday in June of 2008 and started at the foundation on that Monday, the following Monday. And within 6 months, if you can roll back the clock, we were on the verge of a financial collapse of the country.
Yes.
I mean, literally, people were talking about, a second Great Depression possibly. And I thought, my goodness, your timing is really, really perfect, right? So I had to quickly shift my thinking on what we were doing as an organization, how we were going to be meaningful in an environment that was much more difficult than what I thought I was going to go into. And so that's when we shifted to really being intentional about outcomes and evidence and really making a real case for investing in the work. And same thing happened after the pandemic. We work with children in the after school environment. After school, well, school is shut down. What do you do? We became very adept at delivering programming online and various different modalities that we didn't have before, because we have a team that is adaptable, right, and is sharp enough to recognize that nothing's going to change unless you make it change, right? And and so that is been the key in terms of career. I think about this a lot, and how will I say this correctly? People look at CEOs and things like that, and they think, oh, they're so clever, or this, that, and the other. And it's not that at all, really. I don't believe that to be true. I think the biggest pivots occur when people have the courage to try something different, right? When it's the courage, right? I grew up in New York. I'm a kid from Brooklyn, went to high school on Long Island. And there are still folks standing in pretty much in the same place that I left, because they haven't had the courage to extend beyond where they are, right? And so I'm talking about that at a community level, but you can see that in the workplace as well, right? To put your hand up for an opportunity that you're not 100% sure that you can ace, right?
Right.
But having the courage to say, hey, I think I can do that, right? And trying it is to me the secret sauce of everything. And courage doesn't mean the absence of fear, right? It doesn't mean that there's no fear.
Right.
It's just having the courage to just go forward anyway, right? To try to put your hand up and to try for that next thing. And for career advice, that's the career advice I give most people, particularly young people, is have courage to try, um, something that's maybe different from what you're doing right now. It's like making the
Absolutely.
shift from reporter to editor, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
It's a big move.
Absolutely. And I say all the time, and I even have to tell myself every morning when I get up, Carlin, do it scared. You
Yeah,
just gotta do it scared. And someone said, and it was definitely not me, that said, fear can mean one of two things: forget everything and run, or face everything and rise.
right.
So I think both of those, I mean, it's true based on what you've said, that sometimes you just have to take a deep breath, do it scared, and
Yeah,
trust that you've done enough work to make it.
that well, and that's the key, right? Is having the courage to try, right? The courage to try. And the fear of failure, everybody has a little, you know, degree of fear of failure, right?
All the
Uh,
time.
right?
Yes.
But if you don't have that, then you're probably not trying hard for anything hard enough, right? You're not reaching high enough, right?
That's
That
true.
fear comes from extending one's reach, um, beyond the comfort area, right?
Hmm.
And you can extend your reach beyond the comfort area. At least you're trying something, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, so important. So one of the things, so I feel like a little bit, some folks might, because you've talked about being in the military, some folks might be listening and saying, yeah, but he was in the military, so he had to learn to be fearless, or had to learn to push through fear, because it's not an option in the Navy. What are some of the things that you learned while you were in the Navy that still shape how you look, do, or try things today?
So interestingly enough, my team gets sick of hearing me say this, but one of the most fundamental things that I learned in it was on time was 5 minutes early. Like you had, that was on time.
Yes.
You had to be 5 minutes early, and that sounds like a small thing, and it sounds like a joke, but it's a sign of respect for the people who you are meeting with,
Hmm.
and learning just little fundamental things like that. I will also say that for a kid from Brooklyn, the Navy exposed me to such a wide range of other people from around this country, right? Like I met and experienced and became friends with people whom I would have never, ever, our paths would have never crossed. We come from such different backgrounds. You would think that a friendship would not be in the making, but yes, indeed. So the exposure to just folks from all over the country from different backgrounds and what I learned from those folks. I do think there's something around structure and seeing leadership in a military environment, that provides two kinds of learnings. One is that in a hierarchical structure with a lot of rules and a lot of controls, is that leadership is different than when you transition into the corporate space and people don't have to do what you say. just just
Yes.
right, right, yeah.
Right. Then
And
leadership
so
is more than your title. Leadership
yeah,
is
it's more
actually
than your
your,
leadership is more than your title. It's more
yes.
than the stripes on your arm or the stars on your shoulder, on your lapel, right?
Hmm.
So, learning different types of leadership, and what that means, right? And how to navigate that and what kind of environment are you in, and understanding that was really, really good. But the most important thing I think that the military has helped me with in my career is it made me a global citizen. I had never been out of the country, um, when as a child, and when I joined the Navy, I've literally been around the world.
Hmm.
Most continents except for Antarctica. I haven't been there. Uh,
I hear it's cold. Don't go.
uh, but to see the world, and to meet people around the world, and to put this great nation in the context of the world. Um, I've grown up in a time of imperfection in our nation, but having seen the rest of the world and been to many, many different places, there's no other place that I could ever think of as home, right? Because because without that perspective of what it, all these places that seem exotic and wonderful and all that, when you get there, you realize, oh, it's not, it's what we have at home is really good. What we have in the United States is really, really good. And that's sometimes difficult to convey to folks who have not been abroad. I know it was difficult for me to comprehend before I traveled abroad. But now it just gave me a totally different perspective on our country.
Okay. Yeah, and hopefully folks who are listening and watching are going to go and fill out the paperwork to go get a passport. It's something like it's less than 10% of all Americans have a passport.
Yeah.
But if you've learned nothing else, if for no other reason than to just appreciate where you are and currently we're heading into we're in a challenging time, as you said, and
Mhm.
we see a lot of conflict and a lot of other things, but to be able to get out and expand and open the mind, right? Because
Yeah.
there's the exposure piece is what actually contributes to the growth. So
Yeah.
let's go there. You've talked about being a world traveler and having gone to a bunch of different countries. How does that help your growth? So for example, as much as I said that less than 10% of Americans have a passport, most Americans live within, I think it's something like 20 to 25 miles of where they grew up.
Hmm.
Um, I am not one of those people. I've lived in 19 different locations, and no, my parents were not in the military. Uh, my lovely father ran radio and television stations, which leads the life of a military person in terms of how frequently you move. But what does that do? What can you contribute to your growth? Either how you see things, how you problem solve, how you interact with people. What did that global look do and that openness do for you?
Well, it's a really good question, Carla. As I was thinking about your question, I'm thinking, well, first of all, is differences are less scary than they were when I was a kid in Brooklyn, where everything outside of Brooklyn seemed alien and foreign and different. I'm talking about the other side of the river in New Jersey seemed like a different world. But I will say that learning that people are people, no matter where you go, and they're all pretty much trying to do the same thing, trying to provide for themselves and for their families, and trying to, provide some security in their life, some stability in their life, to accomplish something meaningful with their lives. That's been very, very helpful to me to really think about, what is really motivating people when I meet them, having this kind of shared sense of like you use the word global citizen, but that we're all global citizens, whether we know it or not, right? We are, and we all share this planet. And so it's been interesting to me how it opened my eyes in a way to just, you know, broader understanding and acceptance of different cultures, different lifestyles, different kinds of behaviors and things that I think just makes me a more educated person in that respect of having a better understanding of the world.
Mhm. And I think that's reflective also in your team. I know some members of your team. Obviously don't know all of them, but I know you have a number of employees who've been there for a decade or more.
Oh yeah.
And they stick around. And there's always the phrase that people don't leave jobs, they leave their bosses or their managers or what have you. And if that's the case, then you must be a pretty good one because
Uh,
you have folks who are there for so long. What
oh
does that do for you? Sorry, go ahead.
no, no, that's kind of you to put it in those terms. I would say that the team has, created a culture that makes it a place that people come in and they want to stay. Culture trumps everything. Right? If when you go into work, if you feel miserable just because of the atmosphere, the vibe, people just they're not going to stay very long with that. And so I've been very fortunate in that we have a team of folks who have built a culture that is supportive of one another. It's it's ambitious, it's willing to try scary things, and to know that, hey, it may not work, but this is what we're trying to do. And it's the culture, it's the people, that it's not me, it's the people who make up the organization, because they create the values that can't be dictated from the top, right?
Ooh, that's
I
an
could
interesting thought.
I could write a whole bunch of, here are the values we're going to live by. But the values, to me, are reflective of the people in the organization. And I've had the good fortune of, having an initial core group of people who, just were a distillation of the values that create a welcoming and strong and supportive environment, a creative environment. And so I think the people matter so much in that context, right? And my job has been to get out of the way in many respects, and to listen, to what they're telling me.
My big heavy sigh was just, I know that I needed to give everybody at home a moment to go, that part, because I know that there are plenty of people who say that they have company values, or they have company or they have company values posted someplace, but they're words on a wall, they're
Hmm.
words on a page or in an
Yeah,
email or a post. They
yeah,
aren't actually lived day to day by the people
yep,
who are there.
yep.
And so that just, I needed to just let that one marinate out loud for everybody, because I'm pretty sure there were a whole lot of folks, if they're listening in their cars, going, Amen, that's
Yeah,
the one.
yeah, yeah. No, you're right. You could write these things on paper, and they're just words on paper, right? And
Mhm,
unless they're really truly reflective of what people are really doing, and how people are really behaving, and how
mhm.
people are really treating one another in the workplace, then it's meaningless.
Yeah. Yeah. We're getting close to the end of time, so I have two more questions that I do want to make sure we fit in. And so it's going to be a rough turn. There's literally no segue going on here, so I apologize for that. The first is, I do want to be able to highlight something that is an undertone to our conversation so far, and I want to point out the fact that you are a branding wizard, or a branding chief. I don't know. I have to figure out what the alliteration B word is. With that, in that, one of the things that when we talk and we teach, one, if we teach salespeople, if we work with spokespeople, or people delivering presentations on behalf of an organization, people forget to talk about their own organization, and not in a way that they're ramming it down other people's throats. It's,
Mm,
remember, this is where I'm coming from. And so throughout our conversation, you always are making sure to say, here at the US Soccer Foundation, we do this. Here at the US Soccer Foundation, we've done that. And it's not overpowering.
mhm,
It's not ramming down the throat. It is a really nice way of weaving it in, so that if anyone has a question or thought, they can always go back and Google. They can always go back and look and check and say, oh, he talked about this. And what was it? Oh, right. He said US Soccer Foundation.
mm,
There are so many people who don't know how to casually weave it into conversation, to weave their branding in to the conversation. I'll even call myself out on this one. I've mentioned a number of times on my own workshops, but didn't say pro tip partners. And so note to self, remember your own branding while you're
yeah.
hosting. But that's experience, that's time, that's communication, that's practice. And I'm pretty sure that that did not come as oh, I just woke up and started like this. Was that a
No,
reminder for you?
yeah, no, it did not start to come naturally, right? I had to think about it. And I'm going to go back to something we talked about a little while ago. And that is thinking about the other person,
Mhm.
thinking about who's the person that's listening. They don't know me. They don't know who I am, right? It's kind of getting outside of self to just remember, oh, I should mention the U.S. Soccer Foundation, because someone may not know that's where Ed works, right? So it's really being just mindful of the audience, and mindful of the context that you're in, If you're on a stage and your name is on the stage and there's a big, descriptor of you and the name of your organization, maybe you don't have to say that as often. But if you're in the context where you're sharing something with an audience that may be listening or whatever, it's just being mindful of the other person. It didn't come naturally to me. It took me a long time to really realize, because I used to think of it as bragging or patting myself on the back. And it's really providing information. And as a journalist, that's what I'm supposed to do, is
Right.
provide information and make people's understanding easier.
What a great way to look at things. All right. So then the last question of the day is the one that I end with everyone, which is there anything that I did not ask you that I should have?
Well, you didn't ask me how people can get involved with the U.S. Soccer Foundation.
Here comes the commercial. Yay!
So, to be
Perfect.
honest with you, this work, the U.S. Soccer Foundation, ussoccerfoundation.org. Visit our website. See if what we do resonates with you, will be applicable with your company, because this work is important work. As I shared at the beginning, we're not in the business of creating elite athletes. We're in the business of connecting young people in under-resourced communities with coach mentors who are trained to help them develop as whole human beings. And the sport is just a pathway to connect with them. And we, need support at every level to be able to make that happen. And so I think that if you have an understanding of the important role that sport can play in life, what the powerful role that a good coach can play in a young person's life, you may find interest in the work of the U.S. Soccer Foundation.
And that is a mic drop way to end. I love it. So thank you very much, Ed. I have enjoyed this conversation so much, so many good insights throughout. So again, as Ed Foster-Simeon, who is the president and CEO of the U.S. Soccer Foundation, mentioned, you can find more information on ussoccerfoundation.org. And then, of course, subscribe, click, share this episode of the podcast so you can hear more and learn more. So Ed, thank you so much for your time. I know you are busy. Thank you so much for squeezing us in.
Thank you, Carlin. Appreciate you.
Did you hear something you liked? Tell me about it at Carlin RTG Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. Thanks for joining.